Saturday morning here with TheEZGZ. Kind of a foggy morning out on a burrito run. Thought I'd come down here and check out the Big Thompson River. It is full. This was just a trickle last time I brought you here. Yeah, this is just one of three that kind of St. Vrain, Big Thompson, Poudre, and of course the South Platte. And these all go into the South Platte. So imagine that's really high. And that's heading east. Hey gang, welcome back to the TheEZGZ garage. Well, I'm still, I couldn't leave the transmission alone. Just that way. I have to, even if I can't fix it or whatever, I gotta know what I'm fighting. I gotta know where I made the mistake. It just bothers me because I've been doing enough of these for a long enough period of time that I need to know this stuff. So, when any factory, manufacturer puts something into production, like Volkswagen, like I said in a couple other videos, you know, they refined the car. They made a few changes. A lot of them you didn't notice, but I think they made the car better. You try to make a profit margin, find more efficient ways of doing things, but you also correct the weaknesses when you're in there. And I figured I needed to take a little bit more scientific approach, and I apologize for all the drama involved. Some of it was kind of fun though, especially the baking it in the oven. Cracked myself up. That was well planned. But I'm just totally exhausted right now, and I reached a point where I think I know what's going on, and I want to share it with you. So without further ado here, I got out the bore gauges, and I got a piece of bar stock here. And I actually made the physical measurement from the face of the main surface here to the bottom of the boring bar, which is where the intermediate housing rests on. For years I've been using this shift fork jig, and I've had success. Well, I thought it would be a good idea to take the same measurement that we just looked at in the tranny case, measure that distance, and measure this distance on the other jig. Then I saw a difference. 230 thousandths. Oh, isn't that horrible? 250 thousandths is a quarter of an inch, in case you're slow at math. There's a difference in this jig. That's why they give you these spacers. That's why you include all these things for the different years and the different models. I picked up this jig along the way, and it's exactly the same. It has a nylon base, and it has, you know, similar to that one. It's just got a little bit more metal on it. And it didn't have that 230 thousandths difference. This one was shorter. Obviously shorter. Boy, I couldn't figure that out. But on an assembly line, if you're making 20 million vehicles, let's just go to extremes here. Let's keep the drama going. As you're manufacturing things, your cutters start to wear. As it's machining parts, they start to wear. You have to resharpen those tools. The night shift has to do all this stuff. They have to tear down the machines. There's wear and tear on the machines, the cutters, the cutting oil, everything wears. And it's called stacking tolerances. All this wear starts adding up. That's why when you see tolerance called out, in the manuals, it'll say the range is between 4 and 10 thousandths. So you have 6 thousandths tolerance to be in the safe zone, the design zone, the engineering zone. It's too expensive to make things right on the gnat's rear. The more expensive cars probably are closer. If you're buying a Porsche 911 or a Ferrari or a BMW or a Mercedes, it just depends. But the average consumer isn't going to pay extra for that kind of quality. And a lot of times people change cars just like they change underwear. They just get dirty or they don't like the color. So why do it? Europeans are a little bit different background than some of the American people. And this was the market for the Volkswagen Bug, although they were popular all over the world, Mexico, where they were actually manufactured, a lot of it. Anyhow, let's not get off on that tangent. So, as I mentioned, let's just go over it briefly. It had a close ratio transmission and rusty. Had to come out to make a road trip. So I took one out of stock. It didn't have oil in it. I had purchased the 85 140 oil. Where is that stuff? I had purchased this oil, and I was thinking about putting it in Valerie because it has a howly, whiny ring and pinion. So I put that in it, went on a test drive, got up on the interstate, everything was working fine, got it good and hot, brought it back home, it started jumping out of reverse gear, wouldn't stay in. I do not know if this oil had something to do with that, if I did some distortion or what. So I took the transmission apart, and I thought I would be able to do like other transmissions in the past. Darren and I have both showed you this, where on the old transmissions they had a brass saddle and you could just take the reverse gear out. It did not have this shoulder on the side. It just was rounded, and you could flip the reverse over and you could put this worn side, you know, start out fresh, and you could get by. Works fine. Everybody did it that way. No problemo. On this one, I take it apart. I can't do that because of the way it's designed. They changed the design. And when you lining them up, you're trying to line up this with the flat. To reach around here. This is reverse gear. It moves back and forth because it's on the back of the slider hub between first and second. So first, second, and reverse, it's critical that you get all these adjustments done. And look how nice everything's turning right now. Isn't that nice? All that binding, all that pressure is gone. Of course, I was finding this before when I put it in the transmission body. It was tightening up. But I had 12 thousandths in a gasket. I had the tolerances were stacking. I had a difference in my shift adjustment jig. This one is more, it's closer to the actual transmission. I think it's 3 thousandths off, as close as I can measure. So, and that's okay. You're not going to get it perfect. You can be anal, but you got to draw the line someplace. So I thought, I'm going to move this reverse adjusting screw. There's a slot in this piece of metal behind it, and I'm going to move the gear over farther so I can get more contact. Okay, I was at the end of the adjustment slot. The only way I'm going to gain any more adjustment is to turn this in. The only way to turn this in and get this apart and get access and get this piece off so that you can turn it was to disassemble the transmission further. I took the snap rings off, disassembled. I just thought, as long as I got that out, I'm going to go ahead and check my synchro rings. And since they were close to being worn out, I said, okay, I'm going to change first and second synchro. And then I went in a full turn here. That allowed me to adjust it more here. Move the gear this way, get it on contact on that back of that other gear. But I was using a shift jig the other shift jig, which wasn't in the same tolerance level. I didn't check that. I assumed. I was in a hurry. I was being rushed. I've done this many times. I thought it would just be fine. Did it like I'd always done it. Put it in the car. It did not work. And I was in such a hurry, I grabbed that 140 weight oil and put that in during that run. And that's the only thing in my head that I could think of as changing. I didn't know about this other stuff till now. So I brought it back home, I took it apart, and the first thing I thought of, okay, I changed something. So I took it all apart again, and I backed this out a half a turn. I had to disassemble everything just to move this a half a turn counterclockwise and tighten down the jam nut. Put it in the wrong shift jig, got it all adjusted. This time I put in the 90 weight oil, put it in the car. Hell, I couldn't even go out of the neighborhood. The thing was operating horrible. So, brought it back home and made the video of it again, taking it apart. I didn't know what else to look for. It's like, what the heck is going on? And I didn't make the hole, and I was pretty frustrated. And that it was all sticky as heck from that 140 weight on one of those deals. So, you know, this is the learning curve. This is what it's all about. Now, when you got a type A personality like me and an audience like you, this thing's got out of control. So, anyhow, now, with the newfound knowledge, I put it in the correct jig. I made my measurements. I checked everything out. I'm right back where I started. This has to go in order to adjust this if I want to move reverse gear over. But here's the deal. As you can see, and you can see there's a little bit of play in everything. It lets things settle. You have to allow for heat and expansion and vibration, all kinds of things. Now, I was able to catch the light on this small tooth, the smaller tooth being right here. I don't know if it's going to show up in the camera. I'll try to move it around. On the face, not the face, but let's look at the tip, the top. I can feel it. It feels like a file. It's rough. That thing's been chattering. It's been doing some strange stuff. Right there. I don't know if you can see it. I'm looking through the viewfinder and I can see it. I'm not going to be able to use this gear. I'm going to have to change this gear to a full-size gear. Somebody didn't adjust this. They were probably in a hurry at the factory, and because of what I told you, they had taken everything apart to go in another turn. They probably did it like every other one that's been coming down the assembly line, and the final product worked, so out the door it went. You can't have time. You don't have time in production to do it twice, and production workers are different than the line mechanics and the engineers that oversee things. And this was one that got through, I'm sure, and it worked for many years. But with the wear that's on the edge of this one, added to what got ground off on the edge of this one, and then the limited contact area, it finally, with that change in lubricant, the 140 weight, it just couldn't hold it. It was just pushing it off. It was just sliding off. I think that's what really was happening. Plus, I was setting it up wrong in the shift jig and creating a bind someplace. Now, I don't have a spare reverse gear to put on it. I have a trip that I want to go on. I'm setting this aside. I have a similar transmission, late model, single-sided, that I have in the car, and it's working. So I just wanted to put this to rest for your sake, for my sake. It's the holiday weekend. I can't get parts that quick, and I can't spend any more time on this. So I'm thinking with pretty confidently that the stack tolerances upwards of 200 thousandths. The shims, coincidentally enough, the shims that are underneath here, that came out to 96 thousandths. I had a gap by second gear. That was 99 thousandths. The difference in the shift fork jig, the comparison here on the case, you start adding all that up and it creates the error that was my stumbling block. And under some circumstances, it's a good lesson for me. I've learned a lot from this. You always learn from your mistakes. You can't get in a hurry. You need to take each transmission as an individual and be more careful and measure it. And like I've said before, that's why I don't do this for sale. I work on my own transmissions for my own use, and I share the information that I derive with you, and that's where we're going. I want to mention briefly too about cleanliness. And when you drain the oil in your transmission, I know this looks like a disaster. It should look more like an operating room, but it is what it is. That's the way it is. So I'm doing the best I can with what I got. Now when you drain, you wonder where it comes from in a transmission. Well, you're looking at it right here. When you drain the oil and you see all that fuzz on the magnetic plug, on the drain plug, and you say, gosh, what's the matter? How can it do that? Well, it's all these little chips. There's no filter. There's no oil pump. You're supposed to change that stuff out and clean it every few thousand miles, 15, 20,000 miles when the engine's hot. You're supposed to replace that oil and get those contaminants out at that time. It's the edges of all these teeth. When people don't have their clutch adjusted right, or it's not warmed up and it's cold weather and you're crunching through the gears, a lot of you guys have old transmissions, and when they're cold you go shift from first to second and it kind of clunks in. Every time you get that clunk or a little buzz or grind when you're putting it into reverse, you've got a little pieces of metal here, and it's coming off and it's floating around. If you put that oil out in the sun, you'll see it sparkle, and that's because of those brass synchro rings. You start grabbing gears and pounding things and jamming things. There's normal wear and tear anyhow. You got vibrations. You got a horrible little boxer motor that's just shaking itself to death and vibrating everything down the line, including the transmission. And when you hit bumps on the road, that creates a shock. When you step on and off the gas, when you go down a washboard road, for example, you get on an old dirt road that's got all those ripples in it, that's just pounding your suspension and your axles. These are all transmitted back through the system, and this is where you get little chips of metal. And that's why you're supposed to change your oil. And plus, you can only squish oil, and it does break down over time. And transmission oil is different than engine oil. It's made for the kind of sheer strength that it needs for this kind of application. But everything has its limitations, and I just wanted to touch on that too. Been a heck of a morning. Been a lot of drama. I learned a lot. Hope you did too. And thanks for watching. Thanks for subbing. TheEZGZ out.